So as NBA fans, sometimes we get a little too ahead of ourselves and start thinking about the future and what the future might hold for our team, especially when your team isn't currently a title contender, which as Bulls fans, we have to admit to ourselves that at least for this season, the Bulls are not title contenders. A good team that I do fully expect to make the playoffs at one of the lower seeds, but they're not a contending team. Now, next season is a different story though, depending on what players the Bulls can bring in free agency, potentially through trades, and the development of some of these younger players from one season to the next. I'm mainly looking at a guy like Patrick Williams. So in this video, I wanted to talk about this Bulls current roster and who on the team may or may not be with the Bulls next season. So what's going on, everyone? You are listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. So this offseason will be an interesting one for the Bulls because not only do they have a new front office that is looking to make aggressive moves in making this organization better and competing now, but also the Bulls will have some difficult decisions to make in terms of current expiring contracts, managing their cap space, potential trades for players that may not fit long-term for the Bulls going forward. So when we look at how this roster and how they could potentially be constructed for next season, there are a host of scenarios and options for what it may look like. So for the purposes of this video and making it a little less complex, I'm going to be speculating, or I guess I should say I'm not going to be speculating, on players that I think will be coming into the Bulls organization, whether that be through free agency or trades, although I have made a couple of videos on the Bulls 2021 free agency options. But rather, for this video, I'm going to be focusing on the current guys that are on the Bulls roster and which players I think will be in a Bulls uniform next season. And I'll be categorizing them into three tiers. One, the not going anywheres, as I like to call it, the players that are almost certain to retain or return with the Bulls, barring any crazy circumstances. Two, the questionable category, the in-between or 50-50 that they'll, it's kind of undecided whether they'll actually be with the Bulls next year based on a number of different factors. And then three, the goners. These guys aren't coming back, no way, no how. And I'll start with the first tier of not going anywhere. So first and foremost, Zach Levine and Vucevic, they're not going anywhere. Both players are under contract. They're both all-stars. The Bulls just traded away future assets for Vucevic, so there's no way he's going anywhere. The only small, and I mean very small possibility I don't see one of these players coming back is if the Bulls underperform to close out the season, Levine gets frustrated and requests for a trade for the final year of his contract. But I don't see that happening at all. You can tell Levine and Vucevic have started to work really well together, complementing each other nicely, and you can tell it's been a huge relief for Levine to not have the Bulls rely on him on a night in and night out basis. So yes, both of these guys are going to be staying. The other guy who is for sure staying is Patrick Williams. First of all, because he's under contract, under his rookie deal, the Bulls would be crazy to trade him, and doubtful that Arturas does that when, this was a draft pick that he invested for a very high pick on. So he will be with the Bulls next season. I don't have any doubts in my mind about that. And then I've actually got one other guy that falls into this tier of not going anywhere, and that's Troy Brown Jr. And the reason I say that for this one is he doesn't have an expiring contract, so he won't be a free agent this offseason. Two, the Bulls just traded for him to bring some defense to the team, which the Bulls need, and I don't see Arturas having made that trade as just a rental to then move him again in the offseason. And finally, the kid actually has some potential. He's only 21 years old, a very capable defender, a very athletic player that is decent on offense as well. I don't see the Bulls moving him, not when he's still on his rookie contract. Now, as far as the questionable tier, there are a lot of guys on this one. That's because you really can't tell what Arturas and Mark Eversley are going to do. I think a lot of people were pretty blown away by the front office trading for Vucevic and then also drafting Patrick Williams. Arturas makes very surprising moves that are always a bit unpredictable. So as a result, I have Lauri Markkanen in this tier as questionable, which probably doesn't come as a surprise given that Lauri is a restricted free agent. He just recently got moved to the bench. He hasn't had the best season, but he has actually done a little more well recently coming off the bench. But because the Bulls weren't able to reach an extension on his rookie deal before before the start of the season, it leads me to believe that Lauri is looking for a big payday the Bulls aren't going to want to pay. And I have no doubt that some team in the league out there will give him a large contract looking to make a splash and bring in a stretch four, and the Bulls won't be willing to match. I hope it ends up not being the case, because I do like Markkanen and still think he has a lot of potential and hope the Bulls are able to keep him on the roster, but it's really tough to see that happening at this point. Now, another player that is also questionable, but probably not as questionable as Lauri, because he's still on his rookie contract and won't be due for an extension until after next season, and that's Coby White. Now, the reason I say he's questionable is because the Bulls could look to trade him in the offseason for another piece, or to shed his $5.8 million salary, which I know isn't much by NBA terms, but it could mean the difference in bringing in a big name or not, depending on how they position the rest of their player contracts. And of course, it hasn't been a surprise that recently things haven't worked out well with Coby. Starting him at point guard at the beginning of the season, that experiment of him running the offense didn't go over very well. Ever since being moved to the bench, things haven't gone that well for him either, with a few exceptions in certain games. He's proven to be a solid scorer and an above average rebounder for his size. And again, he's only 21 with time left to develop. So I actually don't see the front office parting ways with Coby just yet, but rather continue having him come off the bench next season and see how he does before talking about a contract extension in the following season. Now, Sadaransky and Thaddeus Young are both on partial guarantees for their deals next season, and they have proven to be solid veterans for the Bulls all season. I've been absolutely impressed with them this year, and I would have to say, at the same time, it's possible the Bulls waive them, pay their partial guarantee compensations, and shed that salary to free up even more cap space. I would say it's probably more likely that the Bulls hold on to Thaddeus just because he's had such a good season and has been a great veteran leader for the Bulls. And I feel like if they had the intention of moving him or not wanting to keep him or waiving his final year of his deal, they would have moved him before the deadline when he still had very high trade value. So it tells me that they're going to want to at least hold on to him for that last year of his contract. Garrett Temple, another questionable one, given he's on a 1 year deal and will be a free agent this offseason. We'll see if the Bulls actually re-sign him. He will be 35 next season. He's been a great veteran voice for some of these young guys, but also has been injured, not available to play most recently. And then with adding Troy Brown Jr. coming in, I do wonder where he is going to fit on the roster if they do decide to keep him. Daniel Theis, I would love to keep this guy on the roster. I think he's a huge asset for this team. The energy he brings, the rim protection that he offers, the size in the paint, all of these things the Bulls absolutely need. Now, he's going to be a free agent this offseason, so it will be interesting how much money Theis is going to command and whether the Bulls are going to be willing to shell out some of that cap space money to be able to keep him. But my hope is that they will. And then Furukaminu, the only reason I have him on the questionable list and not on the goners tier is because he's still under contract for next season. Now, the Bulls might trade him if they can find a trade partner, but it'll likely be hard to actually shed that salary of his of $10.1 million that he is owed for a guy who will be 31 and isn't all that productive anymore. And then finally, the last tier, the goners. And I'll try to go through this one pretty quickly. First up, Ryan Archdiacono. I like the guy. He works hard, he hustles, but very unlikely the Bulls pick up that team option for the last year of his deal worth $3 million. Cristiano Felicio. Yeah, he's gone. His contract is expiring, and I doubt we'll see him play in the NBA after this season. Javonte Green, his current contract is expiring, and I don't see the Bulls extending him an offer in free agency. And then finally, Denzel Valentine. Well, you guys know how I feel about Denzel. His contract is also expiring, and he's not going to fit on this Bulls roster going into the future. I like the confidence that he has, but more often than not, he makes very poor decisions on the court, and the Bulls are significantly better with him off the court if you look at his overall box plus minus. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on which players I think will be back next season based on these three tiers. I didn't cover the players on two-way contracts like Devin Dotson and Adam Mocha, as they likely will be brought back on two-way deals again, depending on how they perform in Summer League. I also didn't cover Simonovic, the Bulls' second-round pick that is currently playing overseas this season, since he's not currently on the Bulls roster this year. I want to hear what you guys think, though. Do you agree with my assessment of the Bulls' current players, and which ones are likely to come back next season? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to subscribe as I post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in as always, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.